Hey guys, welcome back to more malicious compliance stories. In this video, a terrible boss fired my entire team and demands we then delete everything, so we made sure we comply exactly with his demands. Let's dive right into the story. The title Malicious Compliance Story starts like this. First, some background: I worked for a mid-sized software company that specialized in custom database solutions for manufacturing clients. Our team of 8 handled everything from initial client consultations to database architecture, implementation, ongoing maintenance, and even support. We were basically the backbone of the entire operation. The company had about 40 employees total, but our team was responsible for probably 70% of the actual revenue-generating work. Our old boss was incredible. He had built the team from scratch, knew everyone's strengths and weaknesses, and genuinely cared about us as people. He was the type of manager who would cover for you if you needed a mental health day, who would fight tooth and nail to get us raises and bonuses, and who actually listened when we had concerns. Under his leadership, our team had a 98% client retention rate. We were crushing it. But then the accident happened. He was driving home from a client meeting on a rainy Friday evening when a semi-truck jackknifed him on the highway. He didn't make it, we were all devastated, and the funeral was massive. Clients showed up, former employees flew in from across the country. It was clear how many lives he had touched. The company's upper management took about 3 weeks to find a replacement. During that time, we basically managed ourselves, which honestly worked fine. We knew our jobs, we knew our clients, and we kept everything running smoothly. I think that's what made them complacent. They figured anyone could manage us since we were so self-sufficient, so enter the new boss. Let's call him new boss because I'm not risking any legal issues here. New boss came from a completely different industry. He had been managing sales teams for a tech startup that had recently gone under. Sounds like great qualifications already. He had an MBA from some school none of us had heard of, wore expensive suits that he clearly wanted everyone to notice, and had that particular brand of arrogance that comes from someone who thinks they are the smartest person in every room. His first day, he called a team meeting. We all filed into the conference room, still grieving, still adjusting, hoping this guy would at least be competent, and he starts with, "I've reviewed your metrics and frankly, I'm not impressed." We all just stared at him. Our metrics were exceptional. We had the numbers to prove it. He continued with something about how teams that require our level of compensation should be performing at twice this capacity and that he'd be implementing changes to increase productivity and reduce costs. One of my coworkers who had been with the company for 12 years tried to explain that our compensation was actually below industry standard for our skill level and that our client retention rate was among the best in the sector. New boss cut him off and said he was not interested in excuses, only results. That should have been our first warning sign, and the changes started immediately. First, he implemented a new time tracking system that required us to log every 15 minutes of our day and categorize it. Never mind that we were salaried employees who regularly worked 50 to 60-hour weeks without any overtime pay. He wanted to optimize our workflow, and then came the client call monitoring. He started requiring us to CC him on every single client email and to notify him before any client calls, so he could quality check by listening in. This was insulting on multiple levels. We were seasoned professionals who had been managing these relationships for years. Some of our clients had been with us for over a decade, but the micromanagement got absurd. He would question every technical decision despite having zero understanding of database structure or our client-specific needs. He would override our recommendations to clients with cheaper, inferior solutions that would inevitably cause problems down the line. When those problems materialized, he would blame us for poor implementation, and about 2 months in, he called another team meeting. This time he announced that he had identified redundancies and would be restructuring compensation to better align with market rates. Translation: he was cutting our pay. He handed out letters informing each of us of our new salary. Mine was being reduced by 18%. Some of my coworkers were looking at 20 to 25% cuts. One team member who was a single parent actually started crying right there in the conference room. New boss seemed genuinely confused by our reactions and said that this was still competitive compensation for our level of output. We tried to push back, of course. We showed him industry salary surveys, we showed him our performance metrics, and we showed him client satisfaction scores. He dismissed all of it though, telling us that if we didn't like it, we were welcome to find employment elsewhere. but that in this job market, we should be grateful to have positions at all. And that is when things started getting really hostile. He began nitpicking everything we did, database queries that ran in milliseconds were too slow for him, reports that clients had been happy with for years were suddenly substandard. He would schedule meetings during our lunch breaks and get angry if we were not immediately available. He started writing people up for being 3 minutes late, despite the fact that we would all regularly stay until 8 or 9 p.m. to finish projects. The breaking point for most of the team came about 4 months into his tenure. One of our biggest clients, a manufacturing company that had been with us for 9 years, had a critical database issue on a Saturday. This kind of thing happened maybe once or twice a year, and we had an on-call rotation to handle it. And well, it was my weekend, so I logged in remotely and fixed the issue within 2 hours. The client was thrilled, crisis averted. Monday morning, new boss called me into his office. He was furious that I had made decisions without consulting him first, and that I had logged overtime hours without his authorization. I tried to explain that this was literally my job and that the client had a production line down and that waiting until Monday would have cost them hundreds of thousands of dollars. He didn't care though. He wrote me up for insubordination and unauthorized overtime. He also denied my overtime pay for those 2 hours, and that's when I started looking for other jobs. So did everyone else on the team, but new boss was not done yet. About 6 months in, he announced that he had been exploring outsourcing options and had found a firm that could handle our workload at a fraction of the cost. We all knew what was coming, but it was still a gut punch when he called us in one by one and handed us termination letters. Effective in 2 weeks. The severance pay was minimal, just a legally required minimum despite most of us having been there for 5 to 10 years. Just 2 weeks of pay and then we were done. But the kicker? He needed us to spend those 2 weeks transitioning our knowledge to the outsourcing firm, training our replacements. We'd be having daily calls with the new team, documenting our processes, handing over client information and basically ensuring a smooth transition so new boss could look good to upper management. Most of my team was defeated. They started applying to jobs, updating resumes and going through the motions of the knowledge transfer, but I was angry. We all were, but I was specifically furious about how we had been treated. During that first week, I quietly consulted with an employment lawyer, just asking hypothetical questions about what we could and could not do, and the final nail in the coffin came on our second to last Friday. We had just finished a 3-hour training call with the outsourcing team, walking them through our most complex client account. New boss called us all into the conference room one more time. He told us that before we left for good the following Friday, he needed us to delete everything from our work laptops. All personal files, all applications we had installed, everything. He wanted these machines completely clean for the new hires. One of my coworkers asked if he meant just personal stuff or if we should wipe the whole machine. New boss got irritated and said he wanted us to delete everything and that he did not want any of our garbage left on these computers. He then added, and this is the quote I'll never forget, "In fact, delete everything. All your files, all your shortcuts, all your personal nonsense from the company's systems. I want zero trace of any of you left." Someone asked for clarification and he got even more annoyed. He said something like, "I don't know how to make this clearer. Delete everything from the systems. All of it." Now here's the thing, new boss had no technical background. He did not understand how our systems worked. He didn't understand that our team had admin access to most of the infrastructure because we had built and maintained all of it over the years. When he said delete everything from the company's systems, I'm 99% sure he just meant our personal files from our laptops and maybe some desktop shortcuts, perhaps some browser bookmarks, but that's not what he said. He said delete everything from the company's systems. I looked around at my team and we were all thinking the same thing. I caught the eye of my coworker who had been there 12 years and he had this tiny smile. Another coworker was staring at her laptop screen with sudden intense focus. We went back to our desks. New boss left for a meeting with upper management, probably to congratulate himself on his cost-cutting measures. That weekend, I had another conversation with my lawyer friend, very carefully asking hypothetical questions about authorized access, following direct orders, and gray areas in computer fraud laws. What new boss did not know was that our team had built most of the internal infrastructure, and I mean most of it, the custom database solutions for clients. Well, Well, we built those running primarily on PostgreSQL with some legacy MySQL systems for older clients, and the internal project management system? Well, we built that using a custom web application, the client portal where customers could submit tickets and track projects, we built that too. The automated backup system, we built that too, using a combination of PG dump automation and rsync scripts to remote storage. The documentation repositories, us as well. The internal wiki with all the tribal knowledge, us as well. The monitoring stack with its custom Python scripts and dashboard, also us. And well, he told us to delete everything from the company systems. So we did. But we were smart about it. We were not going to do anything that was obviously sabotage or that would leave us open to criminal charges. We documented everything. We saved the email where new boss told us to delete everything. We worked slowly and carefully during our final week. We started with our personal laptops as requested, wiped them completely, fresh installs of the operating system, absolutely nothing left. Then we moved on to our work, the systems we had built and maintained. Now, obviously, we were not stupid. We did not delete production client databases. That would have been obvious sabotage and definitely illegal. We were very methodical and very careful to only delete things that we had personally created or that were clearly internal tools rather than client data. The problem for New Boss was that we had created almost everything else. During that final week, working a little bit each day during normal business hours using our legitimate admin credentials, we systematically removed our work product from the company system. We deleted all the internal tools we had built, the project management system, gone, the time tracking database that the new boss loved so much, deleted, the internal wiki with years of accumulated knowledge about client quirks, troubleshooting steps and best practices, erased. The monitoring stack with all its custom Python scripts, removed. The automated scripts that generated reports, verified backups and monitored system health, deleted. We deleted all our documentation, every how-to guide, every troubleshooting document, every process document, every client history file that was not in the actual production databases. Years of institutional knowledge, gone. We removed all the custom integrations we had built between different systems. The automated data feeds, the API connectors, the scripts that made everything talk to each other smoothly, deleted. But here is where it gets interesting. Remember those new backups that New Boss was so proud of during his presentations to upper management? The ones that provided business continuity? We had built that system too. It ran on scripts we had written, using automation we had created with monitoring we had designed. We did not delete the actual backup data files themselves though, that would have been too obviously sabotage and would have definitely crossed the line into illegal, but we deleted the backup automation scripts, the schedules, the restoration procedures, and most importantly, the documentation mapping which backups corresponded to which clients and systems. The backup files still existed somewhere on the storage servers, but good luck figuring out which encrypted archive file corresponded to which client database without the indexing database and documentation we had built over the years. We deleted the monitoring systems and the dashboards that showed system health, the alerts that notified people of problems, and the logs that tracked system performance. It was all gone. We even deleted the internal documentation on how the client databases were structured. But of course, not the databases themselves, but our notes on their architecture, the custom modifications we had made for each client, the quirks and workarounds we had implemented over the years, and the undocumented features we had added at client requests. So yeah, we knew this would all be logged in the system audit trails. That's actually why we were so careful to only delete things during our authorized notice period, using our legitimate admin credentials after being explicitly told to delete everything from the company's systems. The audit logs would show exactly what we did, but they would also show that we did it after being directly ordered to do it. This took us our entire last week, actually. We worked slowly and carefully, making sure we had proper documentation of the delete instruction, working during normal business hours using our normal admin access a little bit each day. By Friday afternoon, we were done. We were very thorough. At one point, the coworker who'd been there 12 years stood up and made a show of saying, "You know what? I'm deleting my entire documentation folder. Everything. All my templates, all my notes, all my code snippets, all my how-to guides." The boss said everything after all. Well, by 5 PM on our last day, we were done. We logged out, packed up our few personal items and turned in our building access cards. And then we left. New boss sent a company-wide email that evening thanking us for our service and welcoming the new outsourcing team who would be taking over on Monday with no disruption to business operations. Monday morning came. We were all home, most of us sleeping in for the first time in years, when the texts started flying in our group chat from the one person on our team who was still friendly with someone in accounting. Apparently, Monday morning had started normally enough for the outsourcing team, the production databases were still running, but then the first support ticket came in through email. And well, they realized the ticketing system was gone and they had no way to track or assign issues. Then a client called asking about their weekly automated report, which had not been generated because the automation scripts were gone. Then someone tried to check if the weekend backups had run successfully, and they couldn't find the monitoring system. By noon, they were starting to realize the scope of what was missing here. They couldn't access the project management system to see what projects were active or who was assigned to what. They could not access the client portal to see incoming requests, and they couldn't find any documentation on how anything worked. They couldn't run any of the automated reports that clients expected every Monday morning. They couldn't verify that backups had run over the weekend. They could not even figure out what was supposed to exist because the documentation of the infrastructure was also gone. And here's the beautiful part, they could not even create a comprehensive list of what was missing because the documentation of what systems existed was also gone. New boss apparently started calling people in a panic around 10 AM on Monday, but none of us answered. We had all blocked his number over the weekend. By Tuesday, the full scope of the disaster was becoming clear. My contact in accounting kept us updated. Upper management had been called in for an emergency meeting. The outsourcing team was floundering. They had access to the production databases, but they didn't know how anything was structured, what the custom fields meant, what the business logic was, or how to handle any of the unique requirements our clients had. They could not even tell which database belonged to which client without the documentation we had maintained. Support requests were coming in through email with no way to track or prioritize them. Automated reports that client had received every Monday for years were not being generated, and several clients had called wondering why their weekly data feeds had stopped working. Wednesday brought the first real casualty. One of our biggest clients, a major manufacturer who accounted for about 15% of the company's annual revenue, had a critical database issue, a corruption in one of their tables that needed to be restored from backup. This was the kind of thing we used to handle in an hour or two. We would identify which backup file contained the uncorrupted data, restore just the table, verify data integrity, and get them back up and running. The outsourcing team, though, could not do it. They couldn't figure out which backup archive contained this client's data, and they could not find the restoration procedures. They did not understand the client's custom database structure well enough to know which tables could be safely restored without breaking dependencies. The client's production line was down for 18 hours, the contract had penalty clauses for downtime, and the client was absolutely furious and threatening legal action. By Thursday, 3 more clients had submitted formal complaints. One had already given notice that they were terminating their contract at the earliest possible date. And yeah guys, before we continue, please let me know in the comments if you enjoy these long malicious compliance stories, because obviously I only want to read stories from those subreddits that you enjoy the most. Also, while you're at it, please don't forget to like the video because that would help me tremendously. So anyway, Friday afternoon, 1 week after we left, the $1 million deal fell through. This was a huge prospective client that sales had been working on for 6 months. The deal was basically done, just waiting for final signatures. The prospect had requested a demonstration of our systems and capabilities as a final formality before signing, and the demo was a complete disaster. Nothing worked the way it was supposed to. The outsourcing team could not demonstrate any of the custom features because they didn't understand how they worked. They could not show the client portal because it didn't exist anymore, and they could not pull up examples of automated reports or monitoring dashboards because the tools to create them were just gone. They couldn't even explain the backup and disaster recovery procedures because all that documentation had vanished. The prospect walked away. I think by prospect OP means customer. Anyway, the following Monday, 2 weeks after we left, new boss was fired. Apparently, the CEO had finally understood the full scope of what had happened here. Upper management had been asking increasingly pointed questions about why nothing was working, and new boss had been making excuses and blaming the outsourcing team for being incompetent. When they finally brought in an outside IT consultant to assess the situation, the truth came out. The consultant asked to see the documentation for the various tools and systems, and there wasn't any. He asked about the backup and restoration procedures, but nobody could find the documentation. He asked about the monitoring systems, the automated processes, the integrations between systems, but it was all gone. The consultant asked who had built all of these systems, and the answer of course was our team. The consultant asked where our team was now, and the answer was that new boss had fired us all. The consultant asked if new boss had ensured proper knowledge transfer and documentation before we left, but new boss apparently tried to claim he had. Someone pulled up the training call logs showing we had only covered client-facing procedures, not internal systems. Then the consultant asked the critical question, why had all of these systems been deleted? Who had authorized that? Well, that is when someone remembered new boss's final instruction to us. They pulled his email from the company archive. The one where he told us to delete everything from the company's systems. The CEO apparently lost it. He fired new boss on the spot, but the damage was done. Over the next month, the company lost 7 more major clients. Word was getting around in the industry about the disaster. The outsourcing firm gave up and terminated their contract after 3 weeks, citing lack of necessary documentation and support infrastructure. The company tried to hire new developers, but it was going to take months to rebuild what we had created over the course of years, and they were hemorrhaging clients the entire time. As for my team, we all landed on our feet. In fact, we landed better than we had ever been. About 3 weeks after we left, I got a call from a VP at a competitor company. Turns out one of our former clients had contacted them, mentioning that our entire team had been let go and suggested they might want to hire us. This competing company had been trying to break into our market segment for years actually, but they lacked the technical expertise. They made us an offer. They would hire our entire team, give us significant raises. We are talking 30 to 40% more than we had been making even before new boss's cuts, full benefits, and let us basically run our own division. They'd provide the administrative support, sales team, and infrastructure, and we would provide the technical expertise and client relationships. We all accepted, but the best part? We were very careful about non-compete and non-solicitation clauses. We did not reach out to any former clients, we didn't solicit anyone, but within 6 months at the new company, we'd been contacted by half of our old clients. Word gets around in the industry, and when they heard where we ended up, they found us. When they asked if we could help them, we'd referred them to our new company's sales team to discuss transitioning their business. We were not allowed to directly solicit them because of the legal agreements we had signed, but we didn't have to. They came to us. We rebuilt many of the tools and systems we'd created before, but this time we did it right. We documented everything properly, we cross-trained people, we built in redundancy, we learned from our mistakes. The old company? They essentially shut down. The CEO eventually sold what was left to a private equity firm that gutted it further. The new boss, or rather the old new boss, I looked him up on LinkedIn out of curiosity. About a year after everything went down, he had been through 3 jobs in 2 years since being fired, and his current position was listed as business consultant, which I'm pretty sure means unemployed but networking. Did the company threaten legal action against us? Yes, actually. About a month after we left, their lawyer sent us threatening letters about unauthorized deletion of company systems and potential violations of computer fraud laws. However, our lawyer, who we'd collectively retained, sent back a beautiful response. It included copies of new boss's email telling us to delete everything from the company's systems, a timeline showing we had done exactly that during our authorized notice period using our legitimate credentials, and the audit logs showing every deletion was performed with proper authorization, and a detailed explanation of how we had only deleted systems and documentations we'd personally created rather than any client production data. We never heard from them again. I think they realized that a lawsuit would require them to admit in court that their manager had explicitly ordered us to delete company systems, which would make them look catastrophically incompetent. Plus, the discovery process would have revealed all the other questionable things new boss had done, like the illegal pay cuts and the hostile work environment. So they decided to cut their losses. Could we have been more precise in our interpretation of his instructions? Sure. But after 6 months of harassment, illegal pay cuts, impossible demands, and general disrespect, why should we have given him the benefit of the doubt? He said what he said, we did what we were told. And wait, Ripestars, don't leave just yet. The next one is another fantastic malicious compliance story that you don't want to miss. It is titled IT Wanted Process Over Results. And by the way, since I post daily stories, please don't forget to subscribe to the channel in case YouTube does not show you my videos. So a couple of years ago, I got shuffled out of the business side and into IT during a reorganization. The official reason was so-called better alignment with software delivery, but the real reason? I'm expensive. I don't do sales and IT has a bigger budget, and also, this is educated speculation, I kept not approving IT builds for not meeting specs, which apparently makes me difficult and not solution-oriented. So now I report to the executive I previously challenged over the quality of his team's work. Since joining IT, everything has to be a ticket. Doesn't matter if it's a question, a clarification, or divine revelation, no ticket, no work. PMs handle ticket creation and prioritization, which sounds fine in theory, except my actual job is to consult with business analysts and developers. I know more about the rules, regulations, and use cases of our software than anyone in the company, and my work doesn't easily fall into a ticket as it's more of a problem-solving role for existing tickets. Still though, no ticket, no work. Bureaucracy over brains. Clients, especially senior ones, tend to reach out to me directly because I can actually answer their questions. Normally, I would just respond and if needed make a ticket afterwards for tracking, but management did not like that. After one particularly spirited discussion over delays to close low-priority tickets in lieu of responding to high-priority client emails, my boss told me to stop responding to client emails altogether. I was to forward them to PMs who would create, prioritize, and assign tickets. I explained patiently that these emails often come from executives and need quick turnaround. Boss's response: "Follow the process or we won't know how overworked you are." Okay then, boss. Let's follow the process. A week later, I get an email from the CFO of one of our biggest clients asking for details about a customized build. Normally, I would get an estimate out in a couple of hours, but instead, I CC'd my boss and PM, confirmed I'd received the request, and politely asked them to create and assign a ticket. A few days later, the CFO followed up: "We need this by Friday." I replied again, CCing everyone, apologizing for the delay and asking that the assigned resource take note of the urgency. Knowing full well no one had assigned the ticket, behind the scenes I'd already done the estimate and informed the client what was happening. Spoiler, nothing. Suddenly my boss is frantically pinging me: "Why haven't you gotten back to the CFO?" I calmly reminded him that number 1, he told me to only work on assigned tickets, and number 2, he was CC'd on every email, and number 3, he would have to ask the PM for a status update. There was a long delicious silence before he finally replied: "Okay, you don't need a ticket for everything. In the future, if it's from an executive, just respond and make a ticket afterwards." Sure thing, boss. Glad we cleared that up. I sent the estimate, everyone was happy, and the peace was restored. And better yet, management now puts results over process. Well, the first part anyway, but peace and results? Well, that's a malicious compliance story for another day. And because it was so satisfying, let's read another malicious compliance story. This one is titled "No Phones Allowed, No Exceptions." So my boss once announced a strict rule during training: no phones out during work hours and no exceptions. Well, a week later, he called me 3 times during my shift to ask why I did not answer his messages, and when I finally called back on my break I said, "Sorry, I was following the no phone, no exceptions rule." He stopped enforcing that rule the next day. And yeah guys, thank you for watching. If you can, please hype the video, and I will see you again tomorrow.